So it is Thursday, April 17th, 2025, and this is a daily brief. The big story today is that Russia seems to be running out of tanks. And I'll talk about that both on the battlefield and then what are they going to do to backfill these tanks? I'll get to that story in just a moment. Let's just work our way through things. 1,230 Russian personnel off the battlefield. That's both killed and wounded. 16 tanks, 54 armored fighting vehicles, 65 artillery systems, 170 vehicles and fuel tanks. And again, this number is reasonably low, and we'll talk about how that connects to this here because that brings to an average of 1292 for the month of April. Previous months with 1328. September was the fourth highest month with 1354. And so this is a pretty low number. It's kind of a calm before the storm. And in spite of the calm before the storm, we've seen some significant fighting, and I'll highlight that. Now, the tank replacement value, at least at one point, used to be about 4 a day, something along those lines. 16 tanks off the battlefield. And the numbers of tanks have been pretty low lately, but it's becoming a problem for the Russians, and this is going to be a real trick when they get to the new offensive. We'll show you that in just a moment. Overnight, Russia launched 75 Shahed drones at Ukraine. A total of 25 were shot down. 30 more were suppressed by electronic warfare. At least 3 people were killed in Russian drone attacks on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. This is overnight, and it was pretty bad. A 17-year-old girl was among the victims of the April 16 strike, which also injured dozens of residents. They hammered Dnipro yesterday, just like the tactics seems to have changed, where they focus on one major city and just keep pummeling it rather than spread out all over the place. Russia violates Trump's energy ceasefire more than 30 times. Now, you would say, okay, yeah, but they didn't actually sign on. But remember when Putin had his phone call with Trump, he was saying, yeah, we agree, and we'll even call these things back. And then it's Ukraine that's hitting this thing within Ukraine because we didn't do it, of course. Yeah. Ukraine Foreign Ministry said that 3 Russian attacks damaged power facilities, 3 recent Russian attacks in Mykolaiv and Kherson. Moscow has also breached a maritime truce in the Black Sea. This is Kherson, the human safari. It's still going on. It's been going on for months. An 80-year-old injured by a Russian drone. An ambulance attacked, 2 paramedics injured. Public buses stopped running downtown due to the high risk of being hit by a Russian drone. Now read it again. It happens every day for 10 months. This is what the Russians are doing. This is the Ruski Mir coming to Ukraine. Shoya burns for the second day in a row. They hit Shoya. The Ukrainians hit Shoya last night as retribution for Sumy. Fresh strikes hit Russia's 112th Missile Brigade, the same unit that launched Iskander-M ballistic missiles at Sumy on Palm Sunday. At least one hit the hangar, no wall, no roof left. So it's still going on. Here's a picture, an image of a fire that's still raging at the CHP-26, a heat and power plant in Moscow. Now, we don't know exactly what the cause is here. I don't know that the Ukrainians have done it, and I don't know that anybody's taking a credit for it. Firemen are having trouble controlling the fire, which is still ongoing. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Look, we have fires in the United States that happen regularly. That's why we have fire departments. So could be nothing, could be directed by Ukraine. We just don't know. This looks like it's directed by Ukraine. A bearing factory burns in Russian Kursk. Now, because it's a bearing factory and because it's in the Kursk, yeah, it seems like it's more likely. Allegedly, after an explosion, which seems like it's also likely, was heard on the factory's territory. So that's happening right now. Reports on another explosion near Moscow, this time near a warehouse. What's inside the warehouse and what caused it is unknown. So sometimes we have the fog of war and we can't really tell. Okay, let's turn to the front lines, and this is going to be pretty robust. Cross direction, Russian invaders led 29 assaults. And again, this number is usually correlated to the number over here with the 1230, what the number is. Cross tends to be the bellwether to tell us what's going on the battlefield, but it's not just Cross. Look at this. Footage from the 71st Jaeger Brigade repelling a mass Russian mechanized attack. This was, I think, near Novosilka access. And yeah, and so it's not just that. There's then the Russians tried to storm the 59th Motorized Brigade near Pokrovsk, rolled in with tanks, trucks, infantry. Tanks got stuck near Seldov, so they sent the infantry on vans and Ladas instead. It doesn't seem to be a good plan. Predictably, they got wiped out. Another assault failed. We see this around April 16th, or on April 16th, around 6 p.m., Zaporizhzhia front. Russians began an assault which involved approximately, now listen to the numbers, 320 personnel, 40 armored combat vehicles, 3 tanks, and 10 buggies. Okay, now what actually happened here? The battle lasted over 2.5 hours. As a result, the Russian forces suffered significant losses. 29 pieces of armored equipment. That's 29 out of 40. 3 tanks, 3 out of 3. Approximately 140 troops out of 320, so about half of them. That's what happened with this 2.5-hour battle. And it's to the point that Andrew Perpetua said this, and I'm going to read his comment after reading this about the engagement here. After watching Russian Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, Kharkov, Velinovasilka, groupings getting mauled and losing most of all their equipment, the Russian Zaporizhzhia grouping decided that they can do that too. Now, his comment here was something really interesting. The Russians are going all in to get to the zero line. And by zero line, I mean having no armor left in reserve. They're getting to that point. And what's interesting about this is like, okay, think about a football team, right? The biggest, baddest, toughest, strongest player is going to be the lineman, right? This is the Chiefs lineman. And like this guy's like twice me. Like you put 2 of me, you can fit 2 of me in this guy's body, right? Okay, and that's what tanks are. Except if the battlefield shifts and what you really need is, because of drones, and what you really need is a nimbleness on the battlefield, then you need someone like this, not like this. I mean, you need the other kind of football player like Ronaldo, right? That's what is needed on the battlefield. And tanks just, it's like they haven't got the message that they're, okay, you're big and tough. I get that, but you're also slow and lumbering and you can be taken out. So that's what's causing this. Now, this is armored vehicles coming from Kazakhstan. See, it seems the rumors are true. Russia is borrowing military hardware from Kazakhstan for Moscow's May 9th parade. Did something happen? Yeah, I was just talking to Greg Terry about this the other day, because this has been confirmed in other places, and he said the same thing too. That I said, I wonder what I think I said that the May 9th parade in Russia is going to be short this year. And he said, no, they'll borrow tanks from Kazakhstan. So that looks like what they're doing. They're short on tanks, and for good reason now. Now you understand why. Institute for the Study of War, Russian authorities recently detained the former Kursk Oblast governor, likely as part of Kremlin effort to scapegoat Kursk Oblast officials for their failure in responding to Ukraine's August 2024 incursion into Kursk. Okay. Here's the power of Russian engineering. Look at this. So this guy's trying to get away from drones. He knows drones are could see him on the battlefield. So there you go. This is what they have. Now, it's not going to end well for him, because a drone can see that and target him, and you're not going to see it go all the way. But yeah, that's a bad place to hide. Okay. And Russians are starting to understand this too. Ukrainians and Russians are very different people, and it appears that at least some Russians are beginning to notice it. So this young man is saying another distinctive feature is that in the countryside, when Ukraine, when a soldier dies, the whole village is in mourning. Like the whole village is kneeling, crying, paying their respects. I've never seen anything like that in Russia, not once in real life, and not on video. Not that I see any kind of ceremony, some kind of procession. Some people somehow suffering, or high-ranking person visits mass graves. Didn't see that once, and it says a lot. That's a really interesting thought, because the way that Ukrainians value life is very, very different. Okay. Jake Sullivan was out speaking recently, and we haven't heard a lot from him lately, but he said that Biden withheld ATACMS from Ukraine for 2 years due to weapons shortages. And then he said the support was measured. He meant he would help Ukraine without drawing the U.S. into a wider war because he was afraid of provoking Russia. Did we learn we were willing to do things later in the war that we weren't later in the war than we were earlier in the war? Yes, because we were prepared to take more risks as this took along, he emphasized. Okay. And everything in me wants to criticize him. And then I think about how much worse things are now. And I didn't think it could get worse when he was slow walking aid because he didn't want to provoke Russia. But it seems like Trump won't even identify the problem as being Russia. Meanwhile, the U.S. is considering cutting forces in Syria by half. The U.S. is withdrawing significant portion of its troops from Syria and it could see noticeable shifts in the ongoing power struggle in that war-torn country. And so they're withdrawing from a lot of regions around the world. And again, the focus is mainly on China, and maybe they're gearing up for that. And, maybe that's an appropriate thing, but it's having a significant effect on the psyche of allies around the world. Sergei Sumaleny said the U.S. pulling back from European security raises the value of Ukraine as a security asset for Europe. I think that's right. Ukraine is the only nation with war-experienced army, highly motivated and capable, and the only democratic nation owning drone technology, the future of warfare. Okay, so drone technology, they have run laps around the rest of the world, and because necessity is the mother of invention. The Minister of Defense in Lithuania was responding to those who were criticizing her for pulling out of the Ottawa Convention. And if there wasn't a situation with war in Ukraine, I don't know that you could have without being severely criticized. Well, her response is, wake up. This is the real world. Russian soldiers will never cross my country's border again. They have before with devastating effect, and they don't want that. This is why NATO exists. Okay, Republican Representative Don Bacon says, I'm glad General George Washington didn't say, let's surrender because Great Britain's too powerful and defeating them's unlikely. But that's what some of our leaders are saying to Ukraine, the victim of a Russian invasion. Surrendering to a tyrant is not peace. That's right. Just a few other articles that are of interest. Indonesia denied Russia's request for a military aircraft base amid regional concerns. Indonesia refused to host a Russian military aircraft. It comes despite the country's recent entry into the BRICS. So good on them. They've probably just dodged a bullet with that. And meanwhile, Maria Zakharova saying the situation around Moldova's autonomous region, it raises serious concerns. The Moldovan government has been recently making active attempts to dismantle the region's autonomous status. Well, the region's stolen land from Moldova is more like it, but okay, that's how she's framing it. As night falls, the drones go up, just an image of that. And finally, Darth Putin. On this day in 2001, Ukraine dismantled its last Tu-95 strategic bomber as per the Budapest Memorandum. Having given up the ability to strike Russia, we invaded them. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for this video. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.